This episode is brought to you by MeUndies. Underwear drawers are like the Wild West. You never know what you're going to pull out or what shape it's in. So upgrade your collection with the buttery soft comfort of MeUndies. MeUndies' signature fabric is as soft as a warm hug from your favorite sweater. Plus, it's breathable and oh so comfy, making it ideal for all-day wear. Get 20% off your first order, plus free shipping at MeUndies.com/Spotify with code Spotify. That's MeUndies.com/Spotify, code Spotify.
Are you a fan of spine-chilling tales of the unexplained? If so, get ready for an exciting new podcast experience, Chillers and Thrillers. Immerse yourself in the world of the paranormal as I, your host, narrate true stories about people's hair-raising encounters with ghosts, demons, and other eerie phenomena. In Chillers and Thrillers, I'm dedicated to bringing you authentic, bone-chilling accounts without any comedic elements or skepticism. So dim the lights, leave your skepticism behind, and settle in comfortably for our bi-monthly episodes, available on your favorite podcast platforms.
Thanks for listening to the Red Treehouse, where I tell scary stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to the Red Treehouse on your favorite streaming platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Oh, and leave a 5-star review. You can follow the Red Treehouse on social media, on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, X, Threads, and Facebook at Red Treehouse Pod. And now, you can find the Red Treehouse on Patreon. Join the Red Treehouse community for as little as $3 per month and receive exclusive member benefits. Simply go to patreon.com/Red Treehouse. As always, if you have a scary story or topic you'd like me to feature on an upcoming episode, email redtreehousepod@gmail.com. Important note: sources for this episode can be found in the show notes. The Red Treehouse is dedicated to my dad. I love you, Pop. As we've gotten closer to Red Treehouse episode 150, I've been binge reading short horror stories from a diverse array of writers. I'm thrilled to share my own original horror story in a few weeks. In the meantime, though, I came across 2 terrific stories whose authors claim are not fiction. Demon's Den, written by Monica Mishra 0607, and Demon in the Window, written by Hearthedead. Are you ready? In this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're going to explore 2 terrific creepypastas, whose authors claim are true stories: Demon's Den and Demon in the Window. These stories are guaranteed to keep you up at night. Do you have the courage to listen with the lights off and the volume turned up? I'll share the stories. You decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Welcome to the Red Treehouse. Demon's Den, written by Monica Mishra 0607. This is not a work of fiction. This really happened to me. I am writing this so no one else makes the same mistake that I did. I moved to London from India immediately after my wedding with Karan, My husband was living in London for 6 years, and his then accommodation was a shady studio apartment, which to me was simply uninhabitable. After a lot of coaxing, he finally agreed to look for a new place. I had just started looking for a receptionist job, so we planned to look for a humble one-bedroom apartment, along with applying for jobs and preparing for interviews. House hunting became my day job. 2 weeks into the search, I realized that for the price we were willing to pay, the only place we could afford was a shady studio apartment. I finally gave up this pursuit and instead decided to focus more towards finding a job. Good things come to you when you stop looking. This is what I believe to be true when, while going through job openings, I got a pop-up for a just posted house rental advertisement. I wish I knew then that this was far from good, that it was going to be the biggest mistake of my life. I'm lucky to be alive to tell the tale. We went to view the house the same day I saw the advertisement, because I didn't want to lose the house to another early bird. One look at the house, and I was mesmerized. For a person coming from the second most populated country in the world, living in a beautiful and spacious 3-bedroom Victorian house, overlooking a garden, and away from the hubbub of the city, was a dream come true. Karen's office, too, was only an hour's commute from there. The rent on this place was almost the same as we were paying for the studio apartment, so Karen didn't mind, though he was a bit skeptical about such low rent, so we checked the house thoroughly before signing the contract. The owner was British Indian, so he agreed to further reduce the rent for his fellow countrymen. We handed over our 1 month's notice letter to end our tenancy to our landlord, and within that 1 month, I got a decent paying receptionist job in a multinational company in central London. Just married, new country, new job, and a beautiful house. It felt so surreal. But this joy was to be short-lived. We moved into the house on the weekend since I was on probation and couldn't take leave. We just had a few possessions to move, but it wasn't a problem since the house was fully furnished and the previous tenants had left all their kitchenware and a couple of other stuff. This surprised me, as the crockery looked quite expensive. When I asked our landlord about this, he said that the previous occupants had to move to Scotland in a hurry, and thus didn't bother to carry fragile stuff with them. I was so naive to have believed him. If only I had tried to dig further or reach out to the previous tenants. The first week in the house was quite uneventful. It was spent arranging stuff and buying some supplies. Everything in the house worked as expected. Washing machine, refrigerator, showers and faucets. No signs of any leakage or creaking floorboards. Karen's suspicions about the house were finally put to rest, and he was convinced that there was no foul play. I wish it had stayed that way, but things took an ugly turn the next week. Karen used to play badminton early in the morning on weekends with his pals, while I preferred sleeping till late. I woke up while Karen was about to leave for his game. He gave me a quick peck on my cheeks and left around 6 a.m. It was still dark outside. I got back to sleep. But soon, I awoke with a jerk from a nightmare where an old ugly woman was strangling me. I was covered in sweat and short of breath. It felt like the atmosphere had changed. The silence felt unusual, and it was obvious that something was off. I couldn't describe it really. It was just this feeling that something unnatural was happening. And just then, I heard someone crying. Initially, I thought I was still dreaming, and it was a part of the same nightmare, but it was really happening. I tried to calm myself and look for the source of the sound. By concentrating hard, it sounded like a cat crying. In India, A cat crying is considered a bad omen. It usually means death of a loved one. First a nightmare, and now this. I was very scared. I headed towards the source of this cacophony, which had increased in volume and now sounded more like wailing. I got more concerned than scared now. What if the cat is really hurt and needs help? The sound originated from the garden. The garden's entrance was through a door in the kitchen. I mustered up some courage and turned the doorknob. Sitting on the fence opposite me was the most grotesque cat I had ever seen. It was an old, wrinkled, and skinny black cat with bright red eyes. As soon as it laid eyes on me, it stopped crying and started hissing. I could see pure hatred in its eyes. It looked at me with murderous rage. I simply stood there staring at this devilish feline. I was still clutching the doorknob when, without any warning, the grotesque being pounced at me from its sitting position with godlike speed. This broke my spell, and I quickly pushed the door shut in time. I expected to hear a thud from when the cat must have hit against the door, but I didn't, and neither did I hear it crying anymore. Everything had gotten eerily quiet, except my heart, which was beating so fast that I thought it would come out of my chest. Karin came home to find me passed out on the kitchen floor. He splashed some water on my face, and I struggled to open my eyes. I felt very weak, and standing up on my own took a lot of effort. I told Karin everything that had happened, but I could see it was hard for him to believe that a cat was planning to murder me. I couldn't blame him for that. Karin helped me calm down by suggesting we call animal control, and they will take care of the stray cat. I assumed it was a stray as it was so skinny and dirty. After talking to animal control, Karin took me to the movies, followed by a lavish dinner to take my mind off the nasty episode. And it worked. I felt much better. We came back late in the evening and directly went to bed. Sleep came almost instantly, as I was very exhausted. Around 3 in the morning, I was woken up by whispering noises. At first, I thought it may have been that Karin couldn't sleep and was watching TV. But then I turned and saw he was out cold. I sat still on my bed and tried to figure out what I was hearing. It sounded like a woman chanting something in Sanskrit. I had never studied Sanskrit, but I could still make out some of the words. Amura, which means devil, and Amritata, which means immortality. This really scared me. Considering all that was happening, I could only think of one thing. The house was haunted. The chanting grew louder now. I wasn't feeling brave enough this time to get up and investigate. It took me a good 5 minutes to wake Karin up from his deep slumber, and another 5 minutes to explain to him about the chanting sound. But the chanting had ceased by then, and he looked at me with some concern. I immediately regretted waking him up. We were just married, and I didn't want him thinking his wife was a nutjob. Before he had a chance to comment, I lied, saying that perhaps the move and adjusting to my new job had taken a toll on me, and that I just needed a little rest. He looked convinced and sympathetic, but I was quite sure that I had not imagined any of this. The next 3 days passed without any incident, and I didn't see the cat again. I felt foolish for thinking the house was haunted. Karin was a network security architect and was working on a critical project, and to meet the deadline, he was asked to work extra hours. I wasn't too happy about it. Even though nothing odd had happened lately, I was still pretty shaken up from the previous week. I came home from work and fixed myself a quick supper. Karin was going to have dinner at his office. With nothing else to do after dinner, I planned to watch a movie. But my laptop wasn't connecting to the Wi-Fi network, I'm quite bad with computers, so I didn't try much and decided instead to connect to LAN, but couldn't find a LAN cable. Just when I was going to give up on my search, I thought of the basement. Maybe there were a few spare cables lying out there. This was the first time I was going to see the basement. Karn and I never bothered to check it, as we didn't really have anything to be kept in it yet. I opened the basement door and it creaked. It was pitch black in there. I tried to feel the light switch with my hand and finally found it. The light was very dim, but enough to see everything. There were 15 or so steps to the basement. The wooden steps creaked under my weight. The basement was pretty big, and all the stuff was covered in white sheets, which were more brown than white, completely covered in dust. I lifted one of the covers, and what I saw filled me with dread. Lying on a big wooden table were many locks of hair, tied together by a red thread, nails, human bones, pin-stuffed dolls, and a skull. There were cardboards with ancient symbols and a terrifying picture of a devilish creature sketched onto them in what seemed like blood. I felt like I was going to throw up. The most upsetting part was that the blood seemed fresh. I had to get out of there. Suddenly, the room felt very cold. The hair at the back of my neck stood up, and I froze. I knew then that someone was watching me. I could smell rot, and the air had turned putrid. I saw some movement from the corner of my eye. I started shivering, and tears started rolling down my face. I felt so helpless then, but I wasn't going to give up. I gathered all the courage I could muster and turned around to run upstairs. That's when I saw the horrible face that I can never forget in this life. I still have nightmares about her. Standing near the foot of the stairs was a woman. Or rather, she was a woman once. Now, she was a hideous being with long, gray, and dirty hair spread across her wrinkled face, red eyes glaring at me with hate, claws for feet, and gnarled, shadowy hands with long and uneven fingernails. She was smiling at me, showing her few rotten teeth. This made her look even more hideous. She was wearing a dirty and tattered black sari. I knew then that she was the cat who had tried to murder me. She hissed at me and called out my name.
Myra!
It came out as a shriek, and my blood ran cold. I knew then that I couldn't get out of there alive. There was no point in struggling. It's strange how during the last moments, your whole life flashes in front of you. How I wished I could tell Karen and my family one last time that I loved them. The hideous thing once again pounced at me, and this time, there was no door to shut. I fell on the floor, and she started strangling me while chanting some mantras. I come from a very religious family, and since I was a kid, I wore an amulet around my neck that wards off evil spirits. I never thought much of it, and always kept it tucked under my blouse. During the struggle, the amulet came off, and the devil woman accidentally touched it, and her hand started burning. She shrieked and hissed for a while, and I could see fear in her eyes. She ran into the wall opposite me and vanished. It took a good 10 seconds, though it felt like an eternity, to register what just happened. But I had to get out of there quick, fearing she might come back. I held the amulet in one hand and started crawling. I don't remember much of how I escaped from the house. Karin told me later that he found me lying outside the house in the freezing cold. I was taken to the hospital, and it took me 2 days to recover physically, though mentally, I was scarred for life. Karin was in the hospital with me the whole time, as I wouldn't let him go to the house alone. This time, Karin believed my story, as he could see faint red marks on my neck. I couldn't live in that house anymore. We went back only once to get all of our stuff. Karin told me later that he saw a skinny black cat in the garden while leaving. Our lives went back to normal, but I was not going to rest until I knew what was wrong with the house. I never went back to the house to investigate, but I spoke with a couple of previous tenants and found some old newspaper articles that gave me the story I was looking for. The ghost haunting the house was Maya. She was the landlord's great-grandmother and a tantric. She used to practice witchcraft in the basement and sacrifice small animals to please Amira, who in turn would have offered her immortality. But by sacrificing just animals, she would have returned as an animal, not human. To come back as a human, she had to make human sacrifices. With an obsession to return as a human after death, she chose to sacrifice her own son, but her husband came home just in time to save him. He knew his wife was a tantric, but he didn't have much of a problem with her sacrificing animals, but not his son. That was too much. He took his son with him and left her alone in the house. She died an old and spiteful woman. And my guess is, she came back as a cat after her death. She is still out there looking for her next victim to please Amira. My request to anyone reading this is to never rent or buy a house if the deal is too good to be true. Demon in the Window, written by Hearthedead. Before you read any further, I want you to know that I have not hyped up or altered any of what you are about to read to scare you. I am not easily scared. What happened to me frightened me more than I've been in a long time. That being said, you might feel the same way after you read this. The information, locations, and dates have not been changed in any way. It is important for you to know I have been involved in ghost hunting for many years. I run tours at haunted locations for newbie ghost hunters and thrill seekers, and prior to the investigation, we have a short Q&A session. At these functions, it's almost a guarantee that someone will ask me if a ghost can follow them home. I used to say something along the lines of, I don't see why not. They can be bound to certain areas, but many spirits come and go as they please. But you probably shouldn't worry yourself. One night, after an investigation of a Swansea, Massachusetts residence, changed the way I felt about that answer. The investigation was conducted as normal, and after we were done, the equipment was broken down, packed into the van, and off we went. While driving back to Cranston, Rhode Island, to where our cars were parked, we discussed how we felt the night went. Nobody had any eerie feelings, and we all agreed that it felt quiet, and we could only base any further conclusions after what we could find in our evidence review. It was shortly after 1 a.m. when I got to my house in Attleboro. As soon as I walked through the door, I put my equipment case at the base of the stairs to my room and climbed into bed. I then proceeded to have the worst nightmare that I've ever had. The dream happened like this. I was alone. It was a dark night with a clear sky. The moon and stars were visible. Although I had no light to use, I could still see what was ahead of me. I was in a labyrinth of some sort, walking deeper and deeper into the winding pathways. The labyrinth had tall, overbearing walls with small glass windows, just big enough to see through. Every time I would look at the windows, a skeletal face would stare back at me on the other side. It was like the walls were hollow, and something was following me inside of them. My heart would race if I looked at the windows, so I kept my eyes forward and focused on the maze. I finally came to the center of the labyrinth. There was an oval-shaped, tomb-like building with a barred door on the front with 2 separate keyholes. Subconsciously, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a key. As I looked at the key, a hissing whisper came about in the background of the dream, saying,
"This key has one purpose. This key can unlock this door."
I put the key in the first keyhole and unlocked the door. As I opened the door, it was dark, but there was a faint glow of orange light that I could see from the top of a spiral staircase. As I began down the stairs, I encountered this cloaked, starved, skeletal monster. Its skin was stretched tightly across its face. It had very small patches of long, scraggly hair, and as it held up a lamp close to its face, I could see more clearly. Its eyes were fixed on me, and it smiled, revealing a few black teeth. At this point, I ran back to the door. I tried to unlock it, but the key wouldn't work. I remembered it saying that the key could only unlock the door. I started to trace my way back through the maze. Its voice became louder in the background as I unleashed it from its tomb. I can't remember what was being said, because I was running for my life. I finally came to the exit of the maze. There was a short road that I followed that came to the driveway of a large mansion. I thought I was safe for a second, and as I started towards the house, the figure appeared again at the front of the mansion gate. It held up its hand like a puppeteer would and conjured 2 large black dogs. The dogs chased me through the yard, and I climbed a fence to get away. On the other side of the fence, I ended up in some neighborhood that felt familiar, but there was no one in any of the houses. I entered a coffee shop and sat down at a table. All of a sudden, there was loud banging on the windows of the shop. The banging became increasingly louder until I closed my eyes, and at that moment, I woke up. Unaware and confused for a moment, I collected myself. Then, I heard banging. I thought I was still dreaming, and luckily, this was reality. All of the hinge windows to my room were open. It is impossible to open these windows from the outside. There is a lock mechanism that goes through the top of the window and into the wall, which then has a sliding lock bolt come through the side of that mechanism to keep the window from moving completely. Still slightly shocked, I closed all of the windows. I then grabbed my digital voice recorder and hit record. I put the recorder on the edge of my bed and went upstairs to see if any more windows were open. None of them were. Upon returning to my room, I listened back to the recorder. While I was upstairs, I captured something, or someone, banging on the window again. I could not get it open this time, and with a frustrated hissing whisper, it said,
"Damn you."
Same voice from my dream. It was the voice of that monster in the tomb. Whatever was behind that door that I opened was in my room that night. It made its presence known. Since then, There has been no sign of it here. I heard its voice. I've drawn its face. I will not forget what happened. You may choose to believe this or not, it's up to you. But from now on, I caution everyone, if you dabble with spirits, you need strong willpower. They can come into your life, and when they do, it can be frightening. This happened the night of March 8th into the early morning of March 9th, 2014. This was written on July 9th, 2014. What did you think of these creepypastas? Leave a comment or email me at redtreehousepod@gmail.com. As we close this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're left with this lingering question. Which of these did you find the scariest? I've shared the stories. Now you decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Thanks for joining me in the Red Treehouse.